Everyone in Nigeria seems to have the same answer to the same question. Fix the leaders, fix the country. Get the right people into office, and everything changes. See, it sounds logical, it feels logical, and to some extent, it is logical. But what if that answer, the one almost every Nigerian agrees on, is actually the reason we keep going in circles? What if we have spent decades trying to solve the symptom while ignoring the cause? Today, we are not talking about leadership. We are talking about something much deeper, and by the end of this video, I think you're going to see Nigeria very differently. There is a dangerous assumption at the center of most political conversations in Nigeria. It is the idea that if you simply change leaders, the country changes. This belief is shared by almost everyone, educated and uneducated alike. But the assumption starts to collapse the moment you compare Nigeria with countries like Singapore and Rwanda. The real question is not whether leadership matters or culture matters. Both obviously matter. The real question is what produces the other? What is the prime mover? Because if you misidentify the prime mover, you spend generations diagnosing the wrong problem. A few weeks ago, I made a video about bandits doing giveaways on TikTok. The point wasn't really about social media, it was about culture. Many people responded with the same argument. What about Singapore? What about Rwanda? They have good leaders. So let's slow that conversation down. Because I think most people are using Singapore completely wrong. Whenever Nigerians want to prove that leadership is everything, they point to Singapore. Singapore gained independence around the same time as Nigeria. Look at where they are now. Look at where we are now. Compare both of them. You see the problem right there in front of you. But that information is useful for comparison, but almost useless for analysis. Because nations are shaped by structures, incentives, and critical historical moments, not just dates on a calendar. Before Singapore gained independence in 1965, its political parties already had clear ideological foundations. The major divide was capitalism versus communism. That matters because ideology creates structure. It tells politicians what they believe, what policies they pursue, and what principles unite them. Nigeria evolved very differently. Our parties began as regional movements and gradually became a mixture of conflicting ideas. One politician calls himself a socialist, another calls himself a capitalist, yet both belong to the same party. That seems insignificant until you understand what replaces ideology when ideology disappears. Power. Once power becomes the organizing principle, politics stops being about ideas and becomes about access. Survival. It becomes about influence. People are no longer selected because of their visions, but because about what they can contribute directly through pecuniary means to society. That is a fundamentally different political culture. But this is still not the biggest thing because people miss about Singapore. And this next part changes the entire conversation. Singapore did not become Singapore because everyone simply voted for brilliant leaders. For most of its growth phase, Singapore functioned as something closer to a pseudo tyranny than the liberal democracy many people imagine today. Elections existed, yes, but the state exercised enormous influence over the media, over labor movements, and political opposition. During the 1960s, opposition figures and left-wing activists were detained under internal security laws, particularly during Operation Cold Store in 1963. Labor unions that once organized militant strikes were gradually brought under tighter state influence until they became partners of the government rather than adversaries. Now, people can debate whether those methods were morally justified. That is a separate conversation. The point is structural. Compare that with Nigeria. The Nigerian Labour Congress is independent, exactly as it should be in a democracy. It exists to challenge government excesses and represents workers. That creates a completely different set of incentives. Singapore minimized friction. Nigeria institutionalizes negotiation. Singapore centralized execution. Nigeria distributes power among competing interests. These are fundamentally different systems. Even with continuity, centralization, and a dominant ruling party, Singapore's transformation still took decades. It did not happen overnight. Now let's talk about Rwanda because this example is even more misunderstood. Rwanda is often presented as proof that African leadership alone can transform a nation. Context matters. Rwanda is far more ethnically homogeneous than Nigeria. Most people share the same language and a much stronger common identity. Nigeria is different. Ethnicity is not simply identity here, it is political infrastructure. It determines trust networks, shapes voting behavior, it influences resource allocation, and determines how coalitions are formed and maintained. Politics is negotiated through identity. Rwanda's post-genocide rebuilding process was also extraordinarily centralized. The government possessed the ability to coordinate policy, to suppress fragmentation, and pursue long-term objectives with relatively little resistance. Now, again, people may disagree with the methods, but methods are not the point. Structures are. Singapore and Rwanda are not proof that leadership is the answer. They are proof that the structural conditions available to leaders determine what is possible. That brings us back to Nigeria, where the conversation becomes uncomfortable. You see, a competent leader in a centralized state can often bend society to his will. Democracy increasingly works the other way around. Abraham Lincoln described democracy as government of the people, by the people, and for the people. He wasn't simply writing beautiful words. Every election reflects millions of individual choices. People shape leadership by voting or refusing to vote. They shape leadership by accepting vote buying or rejecting it. They shape leadership by rewarding competence or rewarding tribal loyalty. They shape leadership by celebrating integrity or celebrating wealth regardless of how it was acquired. Society bends leaders far more consistently than leaders bend society, as long as elections and free speech exist. Democracy is ultimately an expression of collective culture. Many educated Nigerians misunderstand exactly that point. You see, many of us genuinely cannot understand that a significant portion of the population either benefits from, tolerates, or actively participates in the very behaviors we claim to oppose. We speak as though politicians descended from another planet. They did not. They emerged from us. They attended our schools. They grew up in our communities. They have learned our incentives. There is a reason corrupt politicians still receive standing ovations at weddings. There is a reason some accused of stealing billions can still become a respected community elder. There is a reason the man who refuses to pay a bribe is called foolish, while the man who beats the system is called smart. These are not merely leadership problems. They are cultural incentives. Democracies have a habit of transforming cultural incentives into political outcomes. The uncomfortable truth is not that Nigerians want a broken system. Many Nigerians simply want a functioning system for themselves, rather than a system functioning for everyone. That distinction changes everything. So if leadership is not the root problem, what is? Let me be clear. Failed culture and failed leadership are not mutually exclusive. They reinforce each other. One, however, shapes the other more consistently over time. Culture is the soil, leadership is the fruit. You cannot consistently harvest good fruit soil. Replacing individuals really transforms societies because the same incentives simply produce new faces. The yet in this video's title matters. This is not a permanent sentence on Nigeria. Cultures evolve, institutions mature, societies can change. And that change begins by identifying the correct starting point. Every society eventually gets a political class that reflects the incentives it rewards. Politicians are not aliens, as I've stated. They are fathers, they are mothers, they are brothers, sisters. They are within the environment, the milieu itself. And they walk on the streets on a daily basis. So leadership matters, but leadership is really the beginning of the story. Culture is. Nigeria will continue replacing faces while preserving the system that produces them until we demand integrity from one another with the same passion they demanded from Aso Rock. That is why Nigeria cannot work, at least not yet. This is not a video about why Nigeria is hopeless. As I mentioned, the yet in the title means something can happen, change is possible. Hope without honesty is just noise. And the truth is that we may have been solving the wrong problem for a long time. So I want to hear from you. Do you believe leadership is the root cause? Or do you think culture shapes leadership more than leadership shapes culture? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this is exactly the kind of conversation this channel exists for. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe. We're just getting started, and we're looking forward to connecting with more of you as we continue to share these stories that are shaping the Nigerian system. That's it for today. Thank you. Love and light.